Hi, y'all.
Hey.
Raise it up higher.
Good? We good? You hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders doesn't include instructions for falling for another fried mind. That's something you don't anticipate when dating while mentally ill, whether you're the ill person or your partner is. How do you approach love when your brain sometimes feels like it's on fire? How do you interpret flirtations when you're not sure if you're even fully sane? I still think about him every single day. I wonder about his health. I wonder if he still sees Krishna, the Hindu god, personified in a paper bag. I wonder if he's close to being homeless again. It weighs so heavy on my shoulders, thinking that the results of my actions made him sick and devoid of sense. The thought of him crumples my heart. He was an athlete most of his life. His legs were still sculpted from years of chasing after a soccer ball. He was born in Mexico City to a Guatemalan father and a Floridian mother, but raised in Southern California. He was slender and exactly my height. He had a smile like a Cheshire cat and would clutch his stomach when he laughed loudly. He had laugh lines etched into his forehead and into the corners of his eyes, tanned by the sun. His hands were large and warm, and they would envelop mine and gently squeeze to remind me that he was there, and I was safe. We found each other in the worst of circumstances and became a twisted love story, an anxious and rapidly cycling bipolar woman and a schizoaffective man. Two people shakily walking the fine line of wellness propped up by our intensive outpatient program from a psychiatric hospital. I noticed him immediately. I liked his prominent nose and his shoulder-length, straight chestnut brown hair. He seemed kind, searching for reasons to say hello to him. One day I noticed his minuscule beaded necklace. It was made of tulsi wood, which I would later learn was a sign of his devotion to Krishna. I was looking for any possible reason to say something to him, so I chose a thin cord around his neck to comment on. I walked past him sitting at a concrete table by himself. "Hey, I like your necklace." His eyes flicked toward me, and he quickly looked away. I was shocked at how I was so overtly shunned, but made it my resolution that I would become his friend whether he wanted me or not. It wasn't until later that I found out that he had been delusional in the recent past, and didn't really know how to talk to anyone like he once used to, especially women. I couldn't tell whether he liked me or not. It is painfully obvious in hindsight. He jumped the fence of an apple orchard to snatch the fruit that caught my eye. I was the first person he gave a religious pamphlet to. It was about the origins of bhakti yoga and the importance of it in Hare Krishna. So nervous about the exchange, he thrust the booklet into my hands while looking away. Still, I did not know. I never knew when boys liked me. I was an awkward child who became an even more awkward adult and couldn't always pick up on hints. Every time he did something for me, my stomach quivered and shook as if an angry wasp's nest took up residence. He was kind and sweet, yet he didn't show affection in the way I hungered for. So I patiently waited, hoping for a big declaration of longing on his end. One day as we studied together at a cafe, I brought up that I was going to see the band King Khan and the Barbecue Show alone and asked if he wanted to join me. We attended that concert together, and every time my arm touched his, I vibrated. I wimped out asking him in person whether he liked me, and instead texted him haphazardly while I drove on a dark freeway at 3 a.m. In the darkness of my car, between glances at the passing brake lights and medians, I clumsily asked. He replied and said, "I feel like this place in our lives can be a lonely one. Hopefully, we can help each other feel a little more love in it." I was his. We went camping with my friends a week later. We were nervous and shy around each other. It was freezing, and we crowded around a campfire late into the night. He held my hand for the first time as we walked around the campground, the blue light from the supermoon illuminating the woods. The next night, while laying in our sleeping bags, we giggled and sighed and kissed and rolled around. Unbeknownst to us, a friend laying 3 feet away from us was awake the entire time. The next day, as we drove back in my car alone, he began to rattle off his baggage to me. His diagnosis of being schizoaffective, his religious priorities of abstinence, his recent homelessness, and his shaky mental health that could topple over at any time. "I don't care," I insisted. I was still high from his kisses on my neck. the sensation of falling asleep with foreheads touching while curled up together for warmth. I was drunk on the splendor of his touch. He warned me, but I chose to move forward. We soon became a seemingly normal couple. We asked each other intimate questions while walking hand in hand downtown. We timed how long we would stare into each other's eyes without looking away. 4 minutes. We were falling in love. He told me I was the first person he ever wanted to marry. One day as we sat on his bed, while massaging my legs, he told me, while Bob Dylan's Lay Lady Lay warbled in the background, "I think I am where I am meant to be right now. I'm meant to be with you." I can still feel his kiss on my lips after he said that. My sickness became volatile while he struggled on his own. My ills were characterized by the chaos in my brain, while he had intrusive delusions of violence. In an attempt to brighten my plunging moods, we built a garden together over a weekend. We spent time in the sun, shoveling compost, building raised beds together, planting young seedlings. After I made us a dinner celebrating our project, I noticed his stern face and asked him what was wrong. He softly admitted that he had envisioned stabbing me in the back with a large kitchen knife while I was preparing our dinner. After hearing that, my entire body trembled and my stomach threatened to spill its contents. For the first time, I was scared of him. I felt a deep sadness because I knew something pivotal had changed in our relationship. There was fear. Eventually, my brain no longer felt sluggish. The seasons changed, and so did my mental state. He kept having visions of violence, especially against me. He shared how he saw himself shoving me away violently, smacking my hand away from caressing his while we drove to a romantic outing. He refused to take medications. Instead, he meditated for hours a day, followed a strict schedule, was a slave to his own obsessive self-control that he believed held the key to his stability. He thought that his involvement with Catholicism and Hare Krishna would be enough to hold his life together to find lasting peace. Instead, his expectations brought deep feelings of guilt and shame into both of our lives. Despite my medications, therapy sessions, and loving support from my boyfriend, family, and friends, I was being dragged back into mania that would crash into a despairing depression. My heart wanted him while my mind was screaming at me to die. He would prepare our dinner while I lay on his bed with my hands squeezing my head, hoping to compress the chaos. I was eventually taken into a psychiatric hospital. When we talked on the phone in the hallways of the locked-down ward, his voice would become strained. I had a gnawing feeling that I was also affecting his health. He never showed me. He kept a tight grip on himself, to the point where he felt like he could not falter. What I needed most was for him to be vulnerable with me, to feel, to cast away his veneer of seemingly perfect health and just be present with me. His obsessive need for self-control bled into our lives further. My choices were limited, my words brushed aside to do what he thought was best, my pleas to be heard hushed. Slowly, we began to fall apart. Thankfully, my time in the hospital granted me peace in the form of remission. For once in my life, I was finally healthy and stable. While I was gaining strength and clarity of mind, I felt a guilt that was strong and deep. I understood that to be my healthiest, I had to make a painful change. We seemed a perfect, although strange, couple to everyone else. No one realized that I wasn't being treated as a priority. His religions, his denial of illness, his impatience, my fear for my safety, it all finally wore on me. We walked together down my dark driveway, side by side, hands clenched together. It's funny. This is how I imagined us walking when we got old together, I nearly whispered. My throat tightened and my eyes blurred with hot tears. He silently nodded and patted my hand while we walked to his old Civic parked across the street. "I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I never wanted to hurt you," I pleaded. "I know, Victoria," he said. I hugged him so tightly my arms ached. He walked me back to the door of my house. "I don't want you to be standing in the middle of the road when I drive away," he said, thoughtful even with his heart breaking. He kissed me one last time and walked away. I stood on my porch and watched him as he strode to his car. He stood with his driver's side door open, and we peered at each other for what felt like forever before I slowly turned away. I understood that when I shut my door, I was closing a chapter of my life that I had held dear for so long. The sound of the deadbolt was deafening. It's been almost 9 months since I ended our relationship. I feel more myself, and my illnesses are kept at bay while I thrive in remission. I still think about him every single day. I ran into him on my birthday while I was at school. His cheeks were sunken, his chestnut hair buzzed off, his wide smile a near grimace as he said hello. We cried and we hugged goodbye as he told me he still loved me. I told him I still loved him too. There is no manual of instructions on how to fall for another fried mind. I don't think there ever could be. Our love was special, even when contorted by our non-neurotypical minds. For that, I am thankful to have ventured into an uncharted territory with a heart open. Despite it all, I know that I was where I was meant to be for that time of my life, with him.
That was Victoria Leyva. Give her a hand, everybody.